The Beatles' own Apple Records released Taylor's first self-titled album in 1968, but Taylor couldn't promote it because he needed to get help for drug addiction. According to Taylor, Suzanne, whom Taylor refers to in the opening lines of Fire and Rain, refers to Suzanne Schnurr, a friend of JT's that he played with in a band called The Flying Machine, and with whom he used to get high. In 1968, when Taylor was recording his first album, he later learned that Schnurr had committed suicide, which is why Taylor refers to it in the song as the plans they made put an end to you, as in fate had determined it. According to an interview with Rolling Stone, Taylor says that the second verse of Fire and Rain is about his personal and professional anxiety. And the third verse is about his recuperation in Austin Riggs, a residential treatment facility. According to Oprah's Masterclass, Taylor's drummer in The Flying Machine introduced him to smack, or heroin. He used heroin in the late 60s, got treatment for it, got put on a methadone maintenance program to wean him off the heroin addiction. But by the summer of 1971, Taylor was back on heroin. He became reliant on methadone for about 20 years. And in 1983, with the overdose and death of his friend John Belushi, it was a wake-up call to Taylor. He says that those drugs took a hard toll on him because he describes them as freezing you or halting your development. Because rather than experiencing true trial and error and learning how to surmount hardship, personally or professionally, you just hit the escape button that makes you feel good. In 1983, he began 12-step programs to sobriety, arguing that you just have to sweat it out. Taylor's first of 3 marriages was to singer Carly Simon, and she describes it as full of chaos, as a drug-addicted Taylor was emotionally distant and unfaithful. Taylor has remained distant towards Simon, to the extent that she has been prevented from performing at venues if James Taylor is performing there. Taylor has argued that such a measure is the point of divorce. His second marriage was to actress Catherine Walker, which she seems to indicate was highly fraught and unhappy as well in her thinly veiled novel, A Stopover in Venice. His third wife is Boston Symphony trustee Kim Hesburgh Taylor, who joined JT on stage for the song You Can Close Your Eyes. Taylor told The Guardian that he gave John Lennon opiates in the late 60s, which likely led to an addiction for Lennon, and the eventual breakup of the Beatles, according to the BBC. Taylor even met future Lennon assassin Mark David Chapman in a subway the day before he shot Lennon, in which he pinned Taylor to a wall maniacally and told him he was going to get in touch with John Lennon. Taylor's older brother Alex was also a gifted musician but succumbed to alcoholism, as addiction seems to run in the Taylor family tree. Taylor also had to pay $1.7 million in restitution for his wife Kim's brother, Albert Hesburgh III, who, although did the noble act of sponsoring Taylor for his AA treatment, was found guilty of wire fraud, mail fraud, and a false tax return, cheating his law firm clients out of $2 million. So this is the troubled history of James Taylor, and I walk through it with you not to highlight his tribulations, but because he is in a very unique place to be a positive influence on young generations. The most obvious issue would be opioid addiction, which is plaguing our country. Taylor is uniquely positioned to take a stand on that issue that has ransacked our country. It is killing people. Taylor could use his influence for such a good cause, not only because of his own drug abuse, but his brother and his father's alcoholism and the benefits of a 12-step program. He supplied John Lennon with drugs and may be partially responsible for the breakup of one of the greatest bands of all time. He's been through 3 wives, 2 of whom seemed quite unhappily married to him because of his vices. There's another opportunity to talk about marriage and the underlying reasons that marriages can end in divorce. He could talk about being a smart business person, since Taylor claims that his record label, Warner Brothers, shortchanged him on a lot of songwriting royalties. He could talk about how in inflationary, dire times, people try to cheat, like his brother-in-law did, stealing $2 million from his clients, and how That's not how you do things. But instead of all of these salient topics that Taylor could talk about, he came to the White House to celebrate an ignoble bill that will not reduce inflation at all. And the more that I thought about this, I considered the fact that musical artists are generally naive and even misinformed on a lot of real-world issues because they live in a fantasy world. They have made so much money that they delegate it to other people, and they live on an island. In many ways, when they leave the house, they aren't normal people. They get hounded. So instead, they become semi-recluses. So they don't get to interact on a daily basis with regular people. They fail to realize what rising food costs do to the people or how gas prices prevent normal transportation. When you add drugs or substance abuse to that mix, as Taylor said, they are suspended in a state of arrested development. So when an out-of-touch president like Joe Biden calls you to come sing, you come, knowing nothing about what is really going on. You only know what they have told you. Mainstream media has told you that climate, not crime, is the existential threat to you. But then these musicians and celebrities go back and crank up their AC on their mansions when it gets hot and hop on private planes to their second home. It's just out of touch. The musicians are not problem solvers like an Elon Musk, for instance. They are in many ways another drug. They are maskers of the truth. They come out to provide accompaniment to misguided legislation. In this way, they provide the very musical drug that Taylor talked about. It's an escape. It's a way of soothing you. But how do you get soothed when Joe Biden is yelling?
Look, I'm deadly earnest about this. Imagine being a mom or a dad. Looking at your child, you know the needs of innocent to live, and not having the money to pay for it. Not a joke. Think about it. Think about what you'd think about at the time. Think about how you'd feel if you didn't have the insurance and didn't have the money. It's wrong.
So this is what I mean when I say that bleeding heart liberal musicians have fallen into a club of sorts to buddy up to Democratic politicians. To the Democrats' credit, they do understand the value of artistry and how music can transcend barriers, but they do it for all the wrong reasons. There is nothing to celebrate. The market was tumbling by 4 digits when Taylor was singing. How's that for inflation reduction? Biden has allowed 2 million migrants to cross our borders illegally this year. Crime continues to spiral out of control. He just gave a speech at the UN about the Taliban when he personally allowed the Taliban to take back control of Afghanistan. Take a listen to this.
Last month, we lost 13 American heroes and almost 200 innocent Afghan civilians in a heinous terrorist attack at the Kabul airport.
That was last year, Joe, not last month. He doesn't even know the difference. Even the diplomat from Korea knew it. And take a look at the body language of the other representatives at the UN as he speaks.
The world today is not the world of 2001, though. And the United States is not the same country we were when we were attacked on 9/11 20 years ago. Today, we're better equipped to detect and prevent terrorist threats, and we are more resilient in our ability to repel them and to respond.